was 1931. The place was Rameshwaram in Tamil Nadu. On 15th of October, a boat owner named Jainulabdin and his wife Ashiyamma were blessed with a son who they must have never thought would go on and become the Indian president one day. They named this son of theirs Abul Pakir Jainulabdin Abdul Kalam. Kalam's childhood didn't give him the luxury of having a silver spoon in his mouth. He started working at a very young age. To support his family, he used to sell newspapers in his schooling years. Despite not scoring good grades, he was always described as a bright and hardworking student who had a strong desire to learn. In 1954, Kalam graduated in physics from the St. Joseph's College in Tiruchirappalli. It is said that Kalam wanted to become a fighter pilot, but by 1960, he obtained a degree in aeronautical engineering from the Madras Institute of Technology. He joined as a scientist with the Defense Research and Development Organization, which is also called as DRDO, where he designed a helicopter for the Indian Army. In 1969, Kalam was transferred to the Indian Space Research Organization, or the ISRO, where he became the project director of India's first satellite launch vehicle called SLV-3. It was this very vehicle which deployed the Rohini satellite into Earth's orbit in 1980. Rohini lasted for 20 days in Earth's orbit. In the 1970s, Kalam was also part of two projects, namely Project Valiant and Project Devil, which were sanctioned by Indira Gandhi to build missiles for India. However, the projects were later brought to a halt. In 1981, he was awarded with the Padma Bhushan Award in the Civil Service category for his contribution towards India's first homemade satellite. In the 1980s, the Government of India appointed Kalam to lead the Integrated Guided Missile Development Program, or the IGMDP, where several missiles like Agni and Prithvi were developed. It was this time when he came to be known as the Missile Man. In 1990, the Government of India awarded him with the Padma Vibhushan Award in the Science and Engineering category for his contribution towards ISRO and DRDO. Between 1992 and 1999, Kalam worked as a chief scientific advisor to Prime Ministers like P.V. Narasimha Rao and Atal Bihari Vajpayee. In 1997, Kalam's achievements were once again celebrated and he received the highest civilian honor, the Bharat Ratna. In 1998, the Government of India conducted nuclear tests at Pokhran and Kalam was appointed as the chief project coordinator for the same. From 1999 till 2001, Kalam served as a principal scientific advisor to the Indian government. On 25th of July of 2002, Kalam became the 11th President of India. He was the first scientist to hold this position and also only the third Bharat Ratna to do so. In 2007, Kalam stepped down from the President's post after finishing his tenure of 5 years. Post his presidential run, Kalam served the education sector in various institutes like the IIM Shillong, IIM Ahmedabad, IIM Indore, and the Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology, to name a few. On 27 July 2015, Kalam was in Shillong to deliver a lecture on creating a livable planet Earth. With only 5 minutes into his lecture, Kalam collapsed and was later declared dead due to a cardiac arrest by the hospital authorities. On 30th of July 2015, Kalam was laid to rest in Rameshwaram. Over 300,000 people attended the funeral of India's most loved president of all time.
Hello students. So just now you saw a video that described about the life of our great president and scientist, the missile man, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. Now we are going to start our chapter, My Childhood. This part is an extract taken from the autobiography of Dr. Kalam, that is Wings of Fire, that describes the days of his childhood. So you see, I'm starting the chapter. I was born into a middle-class Tamil family in the island town of Rameshwaram in the erstwhile Madras state. My father, Jainulabdin, had neither much formal education nor much wealth. Despite these disadvantages, he possessed great innate wisdom and a true generosity of spirit. He had an ideal helpmate in my mother, Ashiyamma. I did not recall the exact number of people she fed every day, but I am quite certain that far more outsiders ate with us than all the members of our own family put together. So you see, he belonged to a middle-class Tamil family. In the island town of Rameshwaram, you see the map of southern India. See, this is Tamil Nadu, and look at Rameshwaram. It is situated just beside, at the island. After that, you get Sri Lanka. It is just at the tip of Tamil Nadu. Okay, so he was born in the island town of Rameshwaram in a middle class family. And you see, this is the father of Dr. Kalam, and she is the mother of Dr. Kalam, Ashiamma, and his father's name was Jainul Abdin. Okay, so you see it's written Jainul Abdin and Ashiamma. Now, how was his father Jainul Abdin? He was not very rich, and he even did not receive that formal education to gain prosperity and success. So despite these disadvantages of not being rich and disadvantages of not having much wisdom or formal education with great degrees, he was a boatman. But still he had great wisdom. Innate means some inborn knowledge. He was a very kind man, a true generosity of spirit. And he had an ideal helpmate. So he had got a soulmate in Kalam's mother, Ashiamma. She was also a very generous and benevolent lady. I do not recall the exact number of people she fed every day. So you see, she was so kind-hearted that despite being poor and with more children, she still fed many poor people out of her family. So Kalam is recalling that I do not recall the exact number of people she fed every day, but he was certain that many outsiders ate with them, and the number was more than their own family. So you see, next, I was one of many children. A short boy with rather undistinguished looks. Undistinguished means very ordinary and common looks. He was not extraordinary. He belonged to a poor family. His parents did not receive that formal education and high degrees, and about his looks, he was very ordinary and common. He was a short-heighted boy with ordinary looks, born to tall and handsome parents. We lived in our ancestral house, which was built in the middle of the 19th century. So they lived in their hereditary native house. It was a fairly large Pakka house made of limestone and brick on the Mosque Street in Rameshwaram. So you see, this is Kalam's family. There were 3 children. Kalam was the youngest. And you can see Abdul Kalam sitting beside his mother Ashiamma. And you see, this is the house of Kalam. The hereditary house of Kalam, which was a Pakka house made of limestone and brick. And you see, in the below there is a picture of Kalam's house that was, renovated and made. Okay, so you see, he's telling that he belonged to a very middle class family, but they were kind-hearted people. It was a fairly large Pakka house made of limestone and brick on the Mosque Street in Rameshwaram. My austere father, austere means simple, strict and severe. He was a disciplinarian. My austere father used to avoid all inessential comforts. Unnecessary things he used to avoid because he was a practical man who knew that they did not have that resources to lead a luxurious life. So he stopped spending money on unnecessary things, unnecessary comforts and luxuries. But the basic amenities, they were never deprived of. However, all necessities were provided for in terms of food, medicine or clothes. In fact, I would say mine was a very secure childhood, both materially and emotionally. So Kalam stated that his childhood was very safe and secured. He had good parents who were very disciplined and led a very practical life. He was poor, but still he had that mental support from his parents. So he was safe and sound both materialistically and at the same time emotionally. Next, let us proceed. The Second World War broke out in 1939. So we all know that the Second World War broke out in the year 1939, and there were two parties, two opponents involved in the Second World War, the Allies and the Axis. So the Second World War started in the year 1939 and continued till 1945. And at that time, Kalam was only 8 years old. So he was born in the year 1931 and the war started in 1939. The Second World War broke out in 1939 when I was 8 years old. I here refers to Kalam himself, the narrator, because this extract is taken from his autobiography, The Wings of Fire. When I was 8 years old, for reasons I have never been able to understand, a sudden demand for tamarind seeds erupted in the market. So, in the outbreak of the war, due to the outbreak of the war, Kalam did not understand, being a little boy, that there was a sudden demand of tamarind seeds. What is tamarind? You see? These are tamarinds. Okay. So tamarind seeds in the market, he knew no reason for it. But there was a sudden demand for tamarind seeds that erupted, that started in the market. And Kalam took to, earning from a very tender age, from a very young age, because his family needed material and economical support. So his first earning, underline his first earning, I used to collect the seeds and sell them to a provision shop on Mosque Street. And that is how he got his initial and the first earning of his life. I used to collect the seeds and sell them to a provision shop on Mosque Street. Understanding the demand for tamarind seeds, considering it, he took to this business for earning his first income. A day's collection would fetch me the princely sum of 1 anna. So you see, this is a hyperbolic statement. Why hyperbolic? Kalam belonged to a lower middle class family. So even earning at a young age by selling tamarind seeds of 1 anna seemed to him a huge amount. So he is referring to this 1 anna as the princely sum, generous amount. Here it is ironic. It is so small an amount, but to Kalam, being his first income, it was a huge thing. My brother-in-law, Jalaluddin, would tell me stories about the war, which I would later attempt to trace in the headlines of Dinamani. Dinamani was a Tamil daily newspaper. So his brother-in-law, Jalaluddin, would tell him stories about the war, which war? The Second World War that had started. And later, he would try to, link up those stories with the newspaper, whether it was published in Dinamani or not. So you see, I'll give you a glimpse of Dinamani. This is Dinamani, the Tamil newspaper. Next. Okay, our area, being isolated, was completely unaffected by the war. But soon India was forced to join the Allied forces and something like a state of emergency was declared. So his area, their area, it's at the tip of Tamil Nadu. It was an island town, Rameshwaram. So his area was being isolated, lonely, cut off. Isolated means was completely unaffected by the war for a certain period of time. But soon India was forced to join India was the colonized area, so was forced to join UK. Okay, so the Allied forces. UK was in the Allied forces. You can see Allied forces. It was armies of UK, USA and Russia. Along with that, China was also there. In the Ally side and for Axis, it was Germany, Japan and Italy. After the end of the Second World War, it was a victory for the Allied forces, and finally Hitler's Nazi rule came to an end with the end of the Second World War. So it was a victory for the Allied forces. So finally India was forced to join, being a colonized country, forced to join the Allied forces, and something like a state of emergency was declared everywhere. The first casualty means loss, came in the form of the stopping of the train halt as Rameshwaram station. Suspension means stopping. Previously, the train used to halt at Rameshwaram station, but then after the declaration of emergency, the train never stopped at Rameshwaram. So finally, when it stopped at Rameshwaram, newspapers were distributed. But since the train stopped giving a halt at Rameshwaram, the newspapers were thrown out of the running train. So the newspapers now had to be bundled and thrown out from the moving train on the Rameshwaram road between Rameshwaram and Dhanushkodi. And that forced my cousin Samsuddin, who distributed newspapers in Rameshwaram, to look for a helping hand to catch the bundles, and as if naturally I filled the slot. So finally he got his way of second income, but first wage. Wage means salary. So Samsuddin, his cousin, used to distribute newspapers, and he included Kalam at that time to catch the bundles from the throwing train at Rameshwaram station, and he got his second income and his first salary from Samsuddin. So distributed newspapers in Rameshwaram, and Kalam filled in the space, the post, to catch the bundles. Okay, Samsuddin helped me earn my first wages and second income. His first income was by selling tamarind seeds. Half a century later, half a century here refers to after 50 years, I can still feel the surge of pride in earning my own money for the first time. So after 50 years, recalling the incident, Kalam felt a sense of satisfaction, sudden increase. Surge means sudden increase in the feeling of satisfaction that derived from one's own achievements. So he earned his own money from a very young age due to his economical stature in his family. And his first wage he received from Samsuddin, his cousin, by catching the bundles of newspapers from the running train that never gave a halt in Rameshwaram and went straight to Dhanushkodi. So you see, I will show you. Look, there is Rameshwaram and there is Dhanushkodi. Previously, the train stopped at Rameshwaram, but after the declaration of the emergency, the train never gave a halt at Rameshwaram and went till Dhanushkodi. So the people of Rameshwaram received the newspapers in that way. Samsuddin was in that business. He used to throw the newspapers from the running train which Kalam used to catch, and thereby he got his first wage and his second way of income after the incident of the selling of the tamarind seeds. Every child is born with some inherent characteristics. So every child is born with some characteristics that he or she had inherited from his parents or his forefathers. Every child is born with some inherited characteristics into a specific socio-economic and emotional environment. So it refers to the surroundings, to the environment. So a child's education depends upon the inherited characteristics and the surroundings, and a special training that is imparted to them by their elders or parents or guardians or teachers. So you see, every child is born with some qualities, learn and pick up and acquire something from the environment, and train themselves in certain ways by figures of authority. Who are the figures of authority? Person in power of giving orders and decisions, like parents, guardians, elders, teachers. Kalam inherited honesty and self-discipline from his father, and from his mother he inherited the belief and trust in goodness and deep kindness, the benevolent spirit and so did my 3 brothers and sister. I had 3 close friends in my childhood. So he had 3 friends, in his childhood. You see, this is friendship, the bond. 3 friends in his childhood. Who are they? Ramanatha Shastri, Aravindan, and Shiva Prakashan. All these boys were from strict Hindu Brahmin families. As children, none of us ever felt any difference amongst ourselves because of our religious differences and upbringing. So Kalam belonged to a poor Muslim family. He had 3 friends who all belonged from Hindu Brahmin families who are very strict, conservative. Yet the children were never taught about the differences. They grew up together without understanding the differences in their religious aspect and in their upbringing. So you see, that was the real education, the values that he got right from the childhood. Despite being poor, they were learned because they never differentiated on the basis of religion and upbringing. The children were free to mix with each other irrespective of anything. In fact, Ramanatha Shastri was the son of Pakshi Lakshmana Shastri, the high priest of the Rameshwaram temple. So he was a poor Muslim, while his friend was the son of the chief priest of the Rameshwaram temple. But there were never any differences. Later, he took over the priesthood of the Rameshwaram temple from his father. Aravindan went into the business of arranging transport for visiting pilgrims, and Shiva Prakashan became a catering contractor for the Southern Railways.